I really love the design of these. I love all the sharp angles. I love the angry headlights. However,
look, being a Toyota, from a mechanic's perspective, you might think I've got nothing but praise for these things, but the truth is there is something I hate about them.
honestly, it just does car so well. Okay, what you're looking at here has been one of the most in-demand vehicles in the country. Wait times on new examples for these, it stretched out to over 2 years earlier this year. Luckily, those wait times have been slashed. Sometimes it can still be over 6 months, which then leads you to think, well, why not just buy a used example? I mean, it's a pretty modern Toyota. Surely nothing goes wrong with it, right? Well, it's not as simple as that, but don't fret because we're going to be taking you through everything that can go wrong with these. We're going to show you how they're aging, what they're like to drive and live with, and we're going to tell you if we think you should buy one or not. But first of all, there is some critical stuff that you need to know. The highly desirable 5th generation RAV4 landed on our shores back in 2019, and obviously it is still a current model. However, in 2021, Toyota updated the range. It revised the usual stuff like aesthetics, improved the levels of tech and features, and it added more equipment. As far as the different models go, my God, don't you have some options, because there are over a dozen to choose from. There are 5 trim levels, 3 engine options, and they're going to drive either just the front wheels or all 4 via a CVT manual or automatic transmissions. Actually, you know what? The best way to make sense of all this is with a snappy graphic. So if you do need the details, hit pause now. However, the availability of some of those, they're going to depend on the year model, but yeah, you get the idea. Just on the all-wheel drive models as well, it is all-wheel drive on demand. That means the rear wheels only get power sent to them when it detects that the front wheels have slipped. Also, on the hybrid models, the rear wheels, they don't receive any power from the engine at all. It's purely electric and battery power for the rear wheels. Now, if you're a four-wheel driving traditionalist, that might seem like sacrilege, but it's important to know this system, it can send 80% of the torque to the rear wheels. However, look, we're not suggesting that the RAV is some four-wheel driving hero. Plenty of off-road tests have ended with some pretty disappointing results, especially with the pre-update models. But I mean, surely off-roading ability is about as low down the priority list for RAV4 buyers as it gets, right? Speaking of which, with this being one of the most hotly contested categories out there, doesn't this thing have some competition? I mean, it seems like every maker this side of exotic supercar makers has some option to go up against the RAV4. Mazda CX-5, Honda CR-V, Nissan X-Trail, Volkswagen Tiguan, Kia Sportage, Hyundai Tucson, Subaru Forester, Renault Koleos, the list just goes on and on. But where the RAV4 might be putting you off could be in terms of what they actually cost. These things retain their value incredibly well, especially the hybrid models. At the lowest end of the spectrum, you're going to be looking at about $25,000. That'll be a base model GX, an early one with over 150,000 Ks on the clock. But interestingly, that same car, when brand new, was asking about $32,000. So it's only lost about $1,400 a year in depreciation. But then at the other end of the spectrum, take say a 2022 Edge hybrid, brand new, they were asking about $58,000. 2 years later, some of them are swapping hands for nearly $70,000. That means it's appreciated over 10 grand. I mean, talk about a sound financial decision if you bought one of those brand new. Pretty bloody annoying if you're trying to buy one used. Speaking of sound financial decisions, if you're looking at getting any car finance, do yourself a favor and get as many different quotes from as many different lenders as you possibly can. Now, this would normally be a complete and total nightmare, but thanks to Driver, it's really easy and totally free. To give you an idea of just how much money you could save, I jumped on Driver, and the difference between the cheapest and the most expensive total loan payout figure on this actual car was nearly $12,500. So clearly there are some serious savings to be had, and for all of the details, hit the Driver link down there. Now, even though the price might not float your boat, I mean, surely the looks do. Okay, in the base spec with the smaller wheels, and especially in white, it can look a little bit fleet sales spec, but in these sorts of colors with the 18s, even the 19s, what a transformation the wheels and the color can make for these. But look, overall, I really love the design of these. I love all the sharp angles. I love the angry headlights. However, it's a pretty big thing. Actually, fun fact, this shares really similar exterior dimensions with the 90 series Land Cruiser Prado. Yeah, the Prado is quite a lot taller, but as far as width and length and even wheelbase, they're pretty bloody close. Also, I really wish they had better off-roading chops, because some of the overland builds that we're seeing mainly from North America, they look so good. I just wish it could back up the image with some actual ability. Speaking of image, does the exterior quality live up to Toyota's amazing reputation for reliability? Well, sort of. But before we get into the common complaints, through our research we did find that RAV4s made in Japan seem to offer far better build quality and reliability than those made in North America, Russia and China. Now that's really good news for us here in Australia because our RAV4s, they are from Japan. If your RAV4s aren't from Japan, don't fret too much because they're still pretty good. They're just not perfect. For example, some owners have had issues with the roof rails leaking. This can result in the headliner becoming stained, but worst case scenario, the water can run down the A-pillar in behind the dashboard and eventually play havoc with the electronics. I should mention that only seems to impact American-made RAV4s, and even then the water ingress issue, that only tends to happen if it's seeing biblical levels of rain. Speaking of issues with water, and this seems to impact quite a few modern Toyotas, there can be some issues with water building inside the doors. Basically the little drainage holes, they get clogged with crap and it stops the water from coming out. Just open and close the door, listen for any sloshing. This one doesn't. If it does slosh, it's not the end of the world, but because it's a pretty simple fix, just jump on the owners groups because there are plenty of good tutorials there. Actually, just on that, thank you so much to all of the owners groups and forums for helping us research this video. You guys are awesome. Now, on some early examples, the fuel filler hole can be overly sensitive and it can indicate to the fuel filler that the tank is full when it's not. It does that little clicky, annoying handle thing. This was fixed under a service bulletin from Toyota. Most used examples will have it sorted out. If they haven't, Toyota will fix it. Also, some early examples had some problems with the batteries draining too quickly, but this was actually an issue with the data communications module staying on even though the car was off. This is basically the tech that allows a whole bunch of remote functions. It just stays on and eats the battery. But good news again, Toyota did issue a service bulletin, so it should have been fixed, and again, if it hasn't, Toyota will fix it. Now, the other really important thing to check is just how the RAV4 has been treated before you. To take you through that entire process, go and watch our Ultimate Used Car Buyer's Guide because it explains everything. Also, it is critical that you get a vehicle history report done. This will show you if there's any money owing on the car, if it's ever been written off, or even if it's stolen. And to get one of those, either go to ReDriven.com or hit the link down below. Now, common complaints and faults regarding the interior, and look, no surprise here, being a Toyota, loads of complaints about the infotainment system. If you don't identify as a car nerd, Toyota have a pretty terrible reputation regarding their infotainment systems, especially the older ones. In saying that, the more recent ones are a massive improvement. Now, generally speaking, a software update will fix this. However, there were some North American owners that had to have the entire system replaced under warranty. Now, next up, and this was a big complaint from the North American viewers, apparently the cup holders aren't large enough for their coffees. What? Like a real coffee is about this big. It's like a piccolo or an espresso. If your coffee comes in something, this big in that round, it's not actually a coffee. That's just a big milky flavored coffee flavored dessert. It's disgusting. Embrace real coffee culture. Get a real coffee about that big. And if you do get a real coffee, it fits there perfectly. Stop complaining. Okay, next up, and this is more prevalent on the non-Japanese sourced RAV4s, there can be just sporadic electronic gremlins and really weird things. Certain buttons occasionally not working, the windows needing recalibration to work out where the top is. Pretty sporadic. We wouldn't call it common as such, but yeah, mainly the North American ones. I should mention as well, these are generally fixed under warranty. Now, a few owners of 2019 models, they complained that the electric motor adjusters, if your car has that, they can get really noisy. They still work perfectly, but they just make a whining kind of sound. It's just a bit annoying. In fact, it's a really similar sound to what I hear in my brain all the time. Also, just on the seats, it's not that owners were complaining about the comfort levels, they're just a little bit let down that for a car costing sometimes $50,000 and more, they don't feel as premium as you'd expect. But aside from all of that, the other big complaint we found was that owners just felt the interior design was just a bit of a letdown, a bit meh. They did comment that these interiors are incredibly resilient, and in this particular model, this has got over 40,000 kilometers on it, 2019 model. Yeah, really good for resilience. There's hardly any wear and tear in here at all. Even the fabric on the seat's wearing perfectly well. So yes, resilient, might not look all that interesting, but at least it's tough. However, in saying that, one thing I personally like is just how easy it is to use. Everything's just like, these knobs are really good and easy. There's actual controls on the screen. It's not all just touch screen. Actually living with it, really, really good. Oh, just on the wear and tear thing as well, a few, again, North American owners mentioned that the seat fabric on theirs was starting to wear a little bit prematurely and even getting a little bit loose. Now, as far as interior functionality goes, how's the practicality? You've got a pretty crap sized glove box. Actually, that's way too small. You've got a bookshelf just there for tiny books. Door bins that are okay sized. Another little bookshelf here. You've got a wireless charging pad for your phone and phone storage just here, but it's really slippery. So if you go enthusiastically diving into corners, that's going to slide all over the place. The two cup holders that are perfectly sized. You've got okay cubby bin here, spot for sunglasses just there, nothing under the seats there, no net there, nothing down here. That's it for practicality up front. Now, in terms of what stuff you actually get, look, Toyota often don't offer as many features for the dollar spent compared to some of the competition, but you've got to ask yourself, if you do get a car with all of the bells and whistles, how often are you actually going to use all that stuff? But look, chances are you are going to want Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and good news, most of these do have it fitted. Some of the early ones, they don't have it, but it's super easy to retrofit it. It's just a software update. Toyota can generally do it for you. In saying that, a few owners have complained that it's annoying that it's a wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connection. It's not wireless yet, it's coming. But look, you're still going to get a load of stuff with the RAV. At the very least, you're going to get all of this, plus a few highlights like the digital instrument display and LED head and tail lights. The GXL, like this, it adds dual zone climate control, wireless phone charging, and all of this. The XSE from 2022, it adds a whole bunch of aesthetic enhancements and a few extra features like these. The Cruiser, it features extras like a premium sound system, leather upholstery, and since the update, a digital rear view mirror, but according to owners, that can take quite some getting used to. And finally, the Edge, it adds some off-road driving settings, but don't be fooled, it's no Land Cruiser. Now, obviously, we would never expect you to remember all of these features, let alone the list of all the common problems, but the good news is we've added all of those things to our free ReDriven RAV4 cheat sheet. It's at redriven.com and the link is down below. Basically, it's the ultimate used RAV4 buyer's guide. Check it out. I should also mention, there's another link down there that will get you 15% off some of the best wiper blades we've ever used. They're from WiperTech, they're so easy to order, they're easy to fit, and if you order them via that link, you're going to get free express shipping to your door. Now, while we're on the subject of hugely successful Toyota icons, I'm exactly 11 centimeters taller than Toyota rally legend Carlos Sainz. This is in my driving position, and it's really nice back here. It's not the best back seat I've sat in, it's not the worst back seat I've sat in. It just does the job. Seats are really comfortable, good amount of room. Transmission tunnel is quite small, so even if you're in the middle seat, not too bad there. Windows are big, so it feels airy and spacious. It's just nice. One thing I should have mentioned, and also in the front, some of the materials used are just a little bit on the cheap and nasty feeling, so I just scratchy plastics a bit too much in the interior, but that's splitting hairs. Now, wear and tear in this particular example, obviously every RAV4's wear and tear is going to differ from car to car. In this one, pretty bloody good. In fact, I would go as far as saying I don't think anyone's ever sat back here. It feels like a brand new car. But again, as I mentioned, there are reports that these interiors are incredibly resilient. Quick tip, if you've got small children, get one with a leather interior because vomit and snot and old food wipes off leather so much easier than fabric. As far as features and practicality, in the backseat of a GXL, you've got two power outlets, you've got your own air vents, you've got one map pocket, you've got door bins that you can actually get to without having to dislocate your elbow. You've got a pull-down armrest with two cup holders that again are a good size for a real coffee, not those stupid giant ones. It's not coffee, it's not coffee. Now, as far as practicality in the boot goes, superb, really good size, nice low load lip, the actual opening aperture is huge, excellent size boot. Plus, fold the seats down and they go almost flat. There's a slight angle there, but that's being very picky. Now, while we're on the topic of sensible stuff like practicality, let's talk safety features. It is a modern Toyota, it's loaded with safety kit. But to take you through what safety features that you can expect, because we've already discussed the Japanese and North American made RAV4s, how about this time we get someone else to do the voiceover for it? It's someone from another one of the countries of manufacture.
Все модели будут оснащены как минимум 7 подушками безопасности, автономным экстренным торможением, адаптивным круиз-контролем, предупреждением о выезде за пределы полосы движения, системой помощи при центрировании полосы движения, контролем слепых зон, системой оповещения о перекрестном движении сзади и распознаванием дорожных знаков ВС, системой контроля тяги и устойчивости. И даже больше отсюда и его 5-звездочный рейтинг безопасности.
Now, when it comes to complaints and faults regarding the driving experience, a few owners of early examples complain that the mirrors can vibrate at freeway speeds. Now, Toyota have offered a fix for this. It's basically a reinforcement in the door and a modification to the mirror. But even if you don't drive at freeway speeds, get it done because, you know, mirrors, they're important. Aside from that, really the only other complaint we could find about the driving experience was that it's just a bit uneventful. And yeah, unfortunately, I tend to agree. Where a Mazda CX-5 is actually really enjoyable to steer and it has a personality about the way it does everything, it doesn't. And this being a front-wheel drive GXL with the CVT transmission means it's already one of the less inspiring of a pretty uninspiring range. However, I doubt many RAV4 buyers are really focusing on things like steering nuance and overall dynamics of the vehicle. However, I've also spent a fair bit of seat time in a top-spec Edge with all-wheel drive and the hybrid powertrain, and it is a noticeable step up in performance and just overall vibe and atmosphere. Although in saying that, in terms of steering feel and suspension, those sorts of things, it feels pretty much the same as this. However, you might be thinking that the other big advantage of the hybrid is fuel economy, right? Well, you know what? Not necessarily, especially when you take into account the premiums that hybrids are asking on the used market. This actual car is currently for sale for nearly $38,000, but the same car with a hybrid power plant is going to be asking around about $6,000 more. And it's worth really having a look into your driving lifestyle and where you drive, because pocketing that $6,000, that could buy you a stack of fuel. So therefore, if you choose to buy a hybrid model, well, it could be quite some time until you benefit from those savings. But aside from that, the RAV4 just does its driving experience completely, let's say, appropriately for this category of car. And it will do that in pretty much every scenario you're likely to throw at it. Honestly, it just does car so well. However, while it is just so easy to drive, like anything that's easy, it might just not be all that exhilarating. But you know what can be exhilarating, but in a negative way? Finding out about all the crazy mechanical issues these can have, if they have any at all. Look, obviously I'd love to tell you about all those, but I can't because I'm not a qualified mechanic. You know who he is? It's Jim.
Look, being a Toyota, from a mechanic's perspective, you might think I've got nothing but praise for these things, but the truth is there is something I hate about them. And that's the fact that because they are so reliable, if everybody drove them, I'd have to sack half my staff. Look, yes, they are very reliable, but they're not perfect. If you look hard enough, you can find some issues with the EGR. Now, that tends to stick open or shut and makes them run terribly, but the amount of these things that have been sold, really, it's a very uncommon problem. The hybrid control system and the battery is actually almost flawless at this age. Even when they get older, and some of the older Toyota hybrids, very reliable and very unlikely to have any issues at all. And as they do get older, look, the batteries in these, they share the same architecture with all the other Toyotas, so they are typically easy to replace. Now, speaking of the hybrids, one of the things you do need to look out for on these is this. This is the hybrid cooling fan filter. Now, these block up with life's filth. Look, some people have been quoted pretty big money to change these, but the truth is it's a $20 filter. And it's really easy to access. It's just on the right-hand side of the car, just on the front of the back seat. You've just got to unclip a panel there and just change it. It's a piece of cake. And also, these sound great. Listen. One problem these RAVs have, and it's kind of area specific, in regions where they chemically de-ice the road, this is primarily where this happens, one of the main cable connectors at the back of the car where it goes into the electric motor at the back, there's a plastic cover there and it holds the moisture and the chemicals and it just rots out the electrical connection there. If you Google Cablegate, you'll see what's going on there. The connection just rusts away and the car stops, basically. There are a few problems in some areas with warranty. In some areas it's covered, some areas it's not. But again, typically it's only in areas where they're chemically de-icing the roads. Now, the transmission in these, the eCVT in the hybrids, is extremely reliable and again unlikely to have any issues, and so is the 8-speed auto in the non-hybrids, very reliable. Some areas these have a DCM, which is a data control module. There are a few reports of that being an issue. What happens, it just doesn't go to sleep properly, and I think even Adam did mention this, it just doesn't go to sleep properly and it can drain the battery. Now, that is actually part of a recall campaign and it's usually fixed fairly simply just with a software update. And speaking of software updates and recalls, look, just check the recalls on these if you're looking at one or if you have one. There are a few recalls, and most of the problems these things have are nearly always sorted out with a recall, and quite often it is just a software issue. Look, the long and the short of it is, these are arguably one of the most reliable cars you can buy these days, so absolutely highly recommend.
So should you buy a used RAV4? Yeah, of course you should. Just make sure you do all your important pre-purchase inspection homework. But to decide which RAV4 you should buy, you really also need to look at your driving lifestyle and when you're planning on selling it. Toyota have just announced that the RAV4 range will be purely hybrid moving forward. What that will do to the long-term resale values of non-hybrids is really anyone's guess. But if the current used market is anything to go by, hybrids retain value substantially more than their non-hybrid counterparts. Look, we're not suggesting for a second that non-hybrid RAV4's values are going to fall off a cliff or anything like that, but with used hybrids values sometimes asking more than retail values, it's going to be this balancing act between saving money in the short term by buying a non-hybrid now, or saving money in the long term thanks to better fuel efficiency and better retained values down the track. However, another alternative if you want an SUV that ticks all the RAV4 boxes but is actually quite enjoyable to drive is this. But a question for you, if you weren't to buy this or this, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments down there. See you next time. I mean, talk about a sound financial decision. Sorry. The XSE from 22. Oh my God. How the RAV4 has been treated before you. And then what happens?